And as I say, a lot of people lived in very poor conditions. And then there was an expansion of this sort of housing development. And we, like a lot of people, find ourselves in a new housing estate with little or any other facilities available. And what happened, and it all happened very organically, you get a bunch of men who start kicking football in the nearby field with coats for the goalposts, and they decide to develop themselves into a team and enter the local league and all of that. And from that, they thought, we need sort of premises and we better have changed facilities and the like. So they started to raise money to build that. And they built then from that effectively what was a sports and social club. All of it raised with local money. No grants, nothing coming in from the outside world. Generally raised by raffles and things they got within the estate. And they built, as I say, this sports and social club. And not long after that, it became the community association, became a community association. That was probably because that was what people were beginning to talk about way back then. If you want to go to the next slide, Sandra. So as I was saying to you in the first slide, you can get all these fairly academic definitions. But in terms of community development, what it's really about, it's a process. It's a way of doing things. It's a way about engaging with other people. And really, it's ultimately about involving people in the decisions that affect their lives. So if you go back to that housing estate that I grew up in, when we moved in, we thought it was great. 3-bedroom house, inside bathroom compared to the outside toilet that there used to be down the town. And as I say, it seemed to be great, everything like that. I can remember then, a number of years later, my mother saying, if the architects who designed these houses had consulted with the people that were going to live in them, they would have done them differently. And that is definitely, I think, what community development is about. It's about people who come together to try and improve the conditions, whatever they might be, in the area that they live. It's about combining their voices. It's about ordinary people beginning to act and collaborate together. Because there's not a lot that we can do on our own. If we try it on our own, there's not a lot we can do. And I can remember quite a few years ago in Belfast, there was a company made an application to build and open a rendering plant, which was obviously going to render dead animals. Not a very pleasant thing, to have on your doorstep. Where did they make the application for? Top of the Malone Road in Belfast, in a very obviously salubrious, expensive area. The application got absolutely panned and slaughtered, and there was no way that that ever came about. Why? I would guess because a lot of the people who were neighbours there were probably lawyers, maybe judges, doctors, things like that, and they could contact and talk to people in power and get things done. That's not the case for most ordinary people. So most ordinary people have to think about how can they combine their voices with their neighbours to improve things. Now, it's not always about trying to stop something particularly bad happening beside your neighbourhood. It might be about how to develop things. And also, spinning out of community development, you get a lot of academics. One who talked about building social capital, Robert Putnam, professor at Harvard University. And in the work that he did, what he found out was that the more activity that there was in a neighborhood, the more organizations that there were, the more connections that there were between those people, the better the place was likely to be in where they lived. Better, safer communities. That's what Putnam noted. He also noted from his research, basically, he was saying, if you want to increase your life expectancy, go out and join 2 more organizations and be active in them. So Putnam found positive benefits from interaction and the social activity that went on between people in all these organizations. And he went so far as to say it didn't really matter what the organizations were in any given area, if it's sporting organizations, church organizations, community groups, self-help groups, whatever it happens to be, the more of them, the better. And the more that people interconnect and help each other, the better their communities will be. So community development has branched out, I think, quite significantly from where maybe I started. And I can tell you, in my early involvement, basically as a kid, helping my father in terms of collecting the raffle ticket money and all of that, and going into my teens and things like that, none of us had any notion of the concept of community development. Didn't mean anything to us. But we were practicing some of these things without even knowing it. And I think that's one of the important things to keep in mind. You don't need to start with theory. You're probably better starting with a practice. And then, as I say, some of the theory coming along later, in terms of what you're having a look at now, can be very beneficial in terms of how you develop things, to come. Do you want to go to the next slide there, Sandra? What has also happened within Northern Ireland is that, particularly in the world of health, and the Health and Social Care Board, they've developed their community development strategies for health and well-being. And I mean, in this one, I place a link to that strategy because it's something that you can come back to afterwards and look. But what people in health have long recognized is the money that Northern Ireland, that we spend through the Department of Health treating illness and sickness, only goes a small way to improving the overall health prospects for people here. A lot of it lies outside the things that the Department of Health does, whether that's our doctor's surgeries, whether it's our hospitals, picking up things when obviously we're in ill health. And what they do know, and what you'll see the statistics for, is that the difference between the most affluent areas and the least affluent areas is very significant in terms of outcomes with regard to health. And you're quite often looking at maybe 7 years of a difference in terms of life expectancy. But one of the figures that really shocked me most was not that, but it was the length of time that people lived in poor health before their life eventually ended. And in affluent areas, you generally find that that period is relatively short, whereas in some of the least affluent areas, we find that that period is actually very long. So people begin to enter chronic ill health early on. And in terms of health prevention, I think the health authorities began to understand that they needed to consider all the things that were outside the realm of health and the Department of Health and what they did, outside the doctrine, outside the hospitals, and outside the acute services that they were providing. How do you help people live better, happier, healthier lives, that they don't become dependent on these services too early in their life? So they started to give, I think, much more emphasis to that. And certainly they were one of the departments in Northern Ireland, I think, that led the way in this, in terms of, I remember major study of community development in Northern Ireland quite a number of years ago, 20, 30 years ago. The health people were very much involved in that. Now, it doesn't mean that the job's done. It doesn't mean that everything is being practiced as it is preached. Not necessarily. I think there's a long way to go. And the current strategy with regard to health is one of transformation, recognizing that we need to transform how we do things in Northern Ireland if we're to have a better system that actually helps people live a healthier life than what has gone before, for so many people. But while there is that commitment to it, I think there's a huge and long way to go in terms of turning that into actual action that really helps communities. Do you want to move on to the next one, Sandra? So the other thing that spins out of community development, I think, and certainly is very prevalent in the world of health, but it pops up everywhere as well, you'll hear it in other places, is this notion of co-production. And to me, that's a spin-off from community development. because co-production, as its simplest in health, is that there are experts, you know, and the experts may be the medical people, and there are people who receive their services. That's you and me and others. But you and me and others, like, as I say, my mother saying, if the architects had consulted with the people who were going to live in these houses, they would have designed them differently. It is exactly what they're trying to get. There is experience in ordinary people that can influence the better development of services, whether that's in health, whether it's through local government, or anything else. And that the way to do that is to co-produce these things, recognizing that experts have a certain input, but so do the people who receive the services. So do you and me and others. And that we should be able to bring the experience that we have felt through all of this to bear in how they design and develop things for us going forward. And again, what I'd say is that there's a general, I mean, everybody in health will talk about co-production now. And they'll say that they're, you know, very much committed to it. You'll not see actually a lot of really good co-production going on, because people, I think, get confused. They revert back to type. So it means there's still a long, hard struggle for everybody to try and make these things different. But the opportunity is very much there to do. So in setting the whole notion, I think, of community development, it's very much about what it is that we can do for ourselves, what influence we can bring to bear on the powers that be. And it doesn't matter whether, as I say, that's government ministers, whether it's, you know, the local district council, or anyone else, any of the agencies. We have to think, if there are things that affect our communities, can we get change? Can we influence what we think needs to happen? Otherwise, we just remain as innocent bystanders. I'll pass over to you, Sandra, in terms of next slide.
Great, thank you, Seamus. Before we move on to look a wee bit of the structures that exist to support ourselves in the voluntary and community sector, does anybody have any questions or comments for Seamus? You want to chip in before I continue on? Just always like to check everybody's still with us, you know, and still there. All good? No questions for now?
The key thing that I picked up, and it was certainly something we've been trying to put across, Sandra, from day one, is how important practice before theory. I think that's something that we always kind of traditionally have flipped, you know, a sense that we can't put or we can't engage in community work or get involved in community work unless we have the academic qualifications or the you know, that behind us. So to me, that was the key.
Yeah.
Key message of the first session. All right.
Thank you, Brian. Somebody else?
I think it's important, Brian, to recognise that, you know, especially when people are dipping in. If they listen to somebody like me, it's where I've got to after an awful long period of engagement, you know, through my work, eventually through NICVA and other things. But what I'm trying to say is that's where none of us start. You know, we all start, you know, at the very beginning, dealing with issues that's affecting our community and affecting our lives and getting drawn into that. And theory comes an awful lot longer, an awful lot after that point. It's about after you've decided to do things and you're doing them. And then you're looking a bit of help as to how you might develop that and how you might improve it and how you might be better at doing it. And that's some of the things I think we'll talk about later in this session. But it's never a question of looking at, you know, those who are talking the theory and thinking, God, I don't know anything about that. That's where we all started.
Well, so I'll just move on. You can save any other questions then to the last wee bit. Okay. So what we've really done with this section is divided it into a number of different areas, and the first one is really looking at structures that exist for all of us as organisations, no matter what type of an organisation you are, be it a sporting organisation, be it art, be it environment or whatever. There are lots of different structures there and lots of different organisations that are there to support you. So I suppose the first one really is looking at the geographical, whether it's your local council, and when we come to talk about funding, obviously local council is a place to go for that as well, and then obviously local networks that exist. Some of the ones maybe that you would have a relationship with might be Northwest Community Network, or the Rural Area Partnership in Derry. And I know from chatting to Brian that you would have connection relationship with both those organisations. And then I guess organisations that cut across all of Northern Ireland, like ourselves and NICVA. I suppose we haven't said much about ourselves just yet, but I'll talk a wee bit later on about our role as an organisation and what we're there to support you with. There are other local networks as well, such as Volunteer Now, such as Business in the Community, and other ones that specialise in different areas. And I suppose what we want to do tonight is just allow you to connect in and become aware, if you're not already aware, of all of that support and structures that do exist. And you can dip in and out of the ones that are relevant to you. And then obviously there's the thematic structures that exist as well. And just looking down the list there at the various different groups and organisations that are represented, lots of different areas that you might be involved in, right from sort of your more general community development through to maybe looking at the environment, heritage, sporting organisations, I think, as well. So lots of different umbrella organisations, as we call them, such as HNI or the Northern Ireland Environment Link, Disability Action, Sport NI, that are there to provide the support on that particular topic. If you're looking for certain advice or guidance on those various areas. And also when it comes to thinking about lobbying and campaign, and Seamus is going to talk a wee bit later on about just those decision makers and how to influence, but connecting in with your relevant sort of network body on those areas is crucial, because there is power, I suppose, in community and power in numbers as well. So connecting in on those various issues that you might have and being able to, not just with groups in your local area, but also across Northern Ireland and possibly further afield as well. So lots of different groups that you can connect with. Just to say, we do have a couple of documents that we've sort of provided, and I'll send those through to Brian, which will give you direct links into each of these organisations and allow you to find out a wee bit more about them, and obviously come back to Seamus or myself if you have any questions or want more details on who to contact in any of those organisations. And so we have a number of then support organisations that exist and that work across all of Northern Ireland. Ourselves as NICVA are one of those, and I suppose we know most about the work that we do. We're an umbrella organisation, we're a membership organisation, we've over 1,300 members from across a whole wide range of organisations. And in fact, every month when we get our new members in, it's great to see just such a variety from choirs to heritage organisations to some of the larger, suppose, household names as well. And our role really is to represent those organisations, to stand alongside them and provide them with opportunities to influence and so on, and also to support them and provide information, advice and training on the various areas that might be of interest. And I'll talk a wee bit more about the practical help that we can provide on those things. The Rural Community Network you're maybe familiar with as well, and they would be an organisation again that works across Northern Ireland, in particular around rural issues and supporting rural groups as well, and again and very active in terms of lobbying and campaigning on issues even such as the digital inclusion and those type of issues as well. So a good organisation to get in touch with if that's the type of work and the type of area that you're working in. Volunteer Now, some of you may be familiar with, which is an organisation that I suppose represents and stands for volunteering in Northern Ireland, and really I suppose advocates very much for the importance of volunteers and works to provide support to those organisations, but also to the individuals who volunteer, and they have a sort of a connecting service. So if any of you, I know you're all obviously active in your own groups, but if you are interested in having a look at that, they are able to match people in and organisations in. So if you're looking for volunteers, or if you want to volunteer, they can match you to whatever is relevant. Business in the community, some of you might be familiar with them as an organisation, and again, they work to really connect businesses in to their local community and find a role really for them, whether that be maybe their staff volunteering, their staff raising money, being ethical in how they carry out their business, and really working in partnership with local communities and community organisations. So again, a good organisation to get in touch with if you want to connect in. They have a whole database of businesses who have signed up to be their members and who want to maybe make a difference in their, both in Northern Ireland, but also in their local community. So again, if you're looking for volunteers or looking for partnerships, they're a good place to go. And then Social Enterprise NI. So I'm not sure if any of the organisations here are social enterprises as well this evening, but Social Enterprise NI is a membership organisation for social enterprises in Northern Ireland, and again will be very active in areas of policy and so on that would influence that, and very active in supporting those social enterprises. So NICVA, in the work that we would do, a lot of the organisations that be part of our membership would also be social enterprises, but Social Enterprise NI specialise very much in working with social enterprises themselves. Brian had also mentioned about funding bodies, and I'm not sure how all of you are funded tonight, whether maybe you raise, as Seamus had mentioned, through your own fundraising in your local community, and very much through donations or raffles or events when we used to have all of those things, and probably we'll get back to that really soon, or whether some of you maybe do avail of various funding schemes and so on. So I've produced a document that provides the direct links to a lot of the possible funding that you might be applying for in your own organisations. And I guess having a look down the list of types of organisations, try to pick ones that would be particularly relevant to the work that all of you would be involved in. So as you know, Sport NI, again, umbrella organisation, but also one that does provide funding for sporting organisations. If you are in that realm and you haven't had a look at the funding that they provide, do have a look at it. Community Foundation Northern Ireland are a great, I suppose, have a great variety of different schemes, right from very sort of smaller schemes, sort of up to £1,000, right up to very large ones. And because they are almost a lot of different funders will go through the Community Foundation Northern Ireland, on their website you'll find that it's not just for community, it's also for arts, it's also for heritage. There's a great variety of things on there too. Arts Council, again, very similar in the sense of, you as arts organisations, they have a couple of schemes on at the minute. Music for All, I suppose trying to sort of pull out a few schemes and funders that you maybe haven't come across, maybe some of you have, but Music for All funds up to 1,500, and they actually have a deadline of the 1st of April coming up. So if you are involved in anything musical, as I think a few of you are, I'm just sort of looking at my list of organisations that are here tonight. I know we've got sort of bands and various things which would fall under that. So do have a look at that before the 1st of April as well. Halifax Foundation, a very popular funder in Northern Ireland. And again, a relatively straightforward funder to work with, and mainly for that, again, that community development work at a very grassroots level. Garfield Weston, I want to mention, I don't know if any of you, and we'll break it a wee minute to ask you just maybe which ones of these you're familiar with. Garfield Weston are a funder UK wide, and really they do provide a lot of funding, but generally are underrepresented from groups in Northern Ireland. So I suppose they are doing a bit of a call out for us in Northern Ireland to look at it and to apply if relevant. So if you're arts, community, health, environment, faith, museums, welfare or youth, so a real wide variety of funding they provide. And again, it's up to actually 100,000. So they're a much larger funder that they will fund as well. And don't forget about the corporates. So, you know, there are PARNI, Asda, Tesco, just to name 3 of them. But those links will all be on the document. And generally speaking, they will provide funding of in and around or up to £1,000. So handy funding for example, equipment or particular activities, or maybe summer schemes or different things that you might be doing as a one-off or looking to do and raise money for as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the council is there as a network and a support to community organisations, but also do provide a range of funding. And I noticed actually just today that they have Healthy Towns programme, which has just opened, and you can get up to £1,000 if you work in partnership to do something such as maybe a Couch to 5K or some kind of healthy active program. You can, as long as you're working in partnership, you can apply for that as well. So have a good look on their website and see what's available there. And then just to say about resources. So NICVA as an organisation, a big part of what we do is provide practical and hopefully useful resources for a wide range of organisations to use. We've got toolkits, we've got checklists that you can use, we've got templates, all available on the resources part of our website. We also have a number of webinar recordings that we've gathered really over the last 2 years now, I suppose it is. And those are all freely available on our website as well. So I know you're obviously on this journey and you're doing this course over the next number of weeks. But what you might want to do is, if you want to extend that learning a bit and have a look and see if there's anything of interest to you there. It could be governance, it could be fundraising, it could be social media. There's lots of different webinars to have a look at. The DIY committee guide is a great resource as well. I'm sure some of you have come across that on the Code of Good Governance, and it's actually been revised very recently and new booklets have been produced. So I'd be interested to hear if many of your organisations had the little green books, as they used to be, for the Code of Good Governance, and really just guidance for all of us in our committees to know the best way to function and what is best practice and how we should be doing things. So that booklet has been revised and is now available, and we have boxes and boxes of them in NICVA, and we'd love to get those out to you and make those available to all of your committee members as well. But the DIY committee guide has lots of good resources and actually templates available for your board, and even policies and different guidance that you might want to look at. The other resource for you is the Community NI, and have a look at Community NI because it's a free resource to all of our sector, really, in news, providing you with news, providing you with information about training and also jobs and volunteering opportunities. And finally then, Grant Tracker. So Grant Tracker is our funding database with over 1,000 funding schemes on it, which is particular to Northern Ireland and groups in Northern Ireland. And every week on our e-news, we take an excerpt of that. We have our funding news and our funding deadlines, which is freely available to everybody. So if you're not already signed up for that, do send me a wee message and I'll get you signed up for that as well. So that's me on the resources and the structures and the support available. Does anyone have any questions on that before we move on to our last section and back to Seamus? Any questions or comments?
I think, Sandra, you said that we could avail of some of those documents that you spoke about there. Yep. I think those DIY things would be very useful to us if we can speak about that later.
Great, Derek, no bother, I'll get that sorted. Anything else before we hand back to Seamus?
Sandra, could I just ask, it's James here, the list of funders that you said are available, you know, and potentially would be suitable for some of the represented groups here tonight. Am I right in saying that in some cases you need to be a registered charity to apply for some of those? Some of them are.
Yeah, so I had a bit of a look, James. I have a list here that I'll circulate round. Some of them, yes, you do need to be a registered charity. Some of them, if you are on the list, you know, the situation we have obviously in Northern Ireland is a bit of a unique one in the sense of we do have a waiting list, almost a designated list. So if you're on that list, then the funder will recognise that. Other funders now, to be fair, will take a group that is I suppose constituted but not necessarily registered. The issue that some of them have, for example, Halifax, and we've spoken to funders over and over, I suppose being sort of the representation body to the funders as well, is part of the issue for some of them is they're part of a larger outfit, if you like, you know, so Halifax Foundation or Garfield West and so on. And really it's a wee bit of risk management for them. So if they know that an organisation is a registered charity, they are expecting that certain checks and balances are in place. And so that takes a wee bit of pressure off them as far as the risks are concerned. And so, for example, with Halifax, we had a meeting with them recently and we were asking them again about that. And they did clarify for us, yes, that to apply to the Halifax Foundation, that you did need to be a registered charity or at least on that deemed list. And that was the reason why that really at their board level, they wanted to, I suppose, take a wee bit of that risk off by saying that they're registered charities. But each of them would have to be looking at their own on their own sort of merit, if that makes sense, James. And also the council, the local councils, for example, with yourselves and Derry City and Strabane, some of them will be very flexible and not necessarily ask for organisations to be registered charities. Sporting organisations, if they're set up differently, can sometimes as well, you know, as long as they are, you know, able to provide their documents and their bank details and their accounts and so on, will also have the opportunity. So in the list, it doesn't necessarily say if you have to be a registered charity or not, but if each of the people on the call here can go in and look at the funding that would be most relevant to them, it's very clearly laid out once you would go into the actual website.
Can I ask too, Sandra, I mean, I suppose one point, first of all, the Community in Northern Ireland website's really, really valuable, you know, particularly for organisations who have jobs to advertise. You know, obviously, whenever you're going through a recruitment process, it can be quite expensive, but correct me if I'm wrong, Sandra, that service is actually free and there's quite a huge readership right across Northern Ireland, is that right?
Yeah, we the Community NI has been, I suppose, a great success in a sense, and really a lot of the traffic is driven, you're right, by the jobs, and that would be one of the top things that people are looking at. It's absolutely free at the minute, and organisations across our sector actually now are using that as their main way. Even some of the very large ones, some of our board members have actually said that that's the main way in which they would recruit for their own organisation. So because it has such wide readership, and I don't have the numbers just at my fingertips, but it has such wide readership that actually it is recognised as being, I suppose, a fair way and a good way to recruit staff and volunteers and even board members as well. It's a great way to do that. And
see the grant tracker service you provide too, Sandra, do you have to register and pay for that, or is that again, it's another very valuable resource?
Yeah. So as I said, there's over 1,000 different schemes, which are all Northern Ireland schemes, which is I suppose a unique selling point about Grant Tracker. Grant Tracker at the minute is a charged for service. It's a reduced service for our product, rather, for our members at £100 per year and £145 for non-members of NICVA. But what was mentioned earlier was the e-news that comes out on a Monday is a completely free service, and every Monday our fundraising advice officer will prepare maybe 4 or 5 news articles on funding, that's maybe new funding that's been released, and 3 or 4 and sometimes 5 deadlines are coming up. So there is that information that is freely available on a Monday, and also permanently on our website, on the Grant Tracker website. When you go to the homepage, if you go up the top of it, and if I have time later on, I'll show you, but if you go up the top of that, it says fundraising advice, and all of the backlog and every single one of those funding newses are on there. So that again is a free resource for whoever wants to use it. And in fact, our fundraising advice officer, if you maybe for some reason, you know, maybe don't want to subscribe or can't afford the £100 a year, just ring NICVA and tell them what you're looking for, and we'll do a search for you on Grant Tracker. It's no problem. That's what we're here for. Anything else, Ben?
I suppose just a wee bit on that there, Sandra. If we log on to your website, we can find out more details about becoming a member and costs and everything else.
Yeah, so we're pleased to say that organisations that are less than 20,000 income per year are free. So please do join, especially if you're in that free bracket, you might as well. And then over and above that, it really starts at £30 a year and works sort of gradually up. So do have a look. Do have a look on our website. Gives you the detail about membership. And whenever you're a member, I guess you are linked in to a lot of communications. Seamus will send direct emails out to all of our members. We have our members bulletin once a month as well. It has all sort of up and coming news and training and information and I suppose policy on it as well. And then we also have a 30% off all of our training. And, you know, if you're using our conference facilities, ever, it's 30% off that as well. So there's lots of benefits to you as an organisation in joining. But as I say, if you're less than 20,000 a year, you do get it completely free.
And I'm just asking, these companies that do grants, do you see much benefit in joining them? They charge a fee each month.
Who would that be?
I guess free solutions and stuff like that.
I couldn't really comment about private companies that are providing that sort of funding advice. Is that Peter?
Yeah.
Peter, just to sort of say, you know, we're very keen that we let all organisations in our sector know that we as NICVA are here to provide you with advice and information and training. We would like you to come to us because we're providing that for free for our sector. If you're wanting more, I guess, intense support, maybe helping to write a funding application or, you know, that type of thing, yes, you might want to go to a private business or a private company. I just would be very careful about it because what you want to make sure is you want to make sure that you have ownership of that it's your funding application, that it's your strategy, and that you're not necessarily handing that over, that you're getting support to do that, but you're not handing that over to a private company or somebody else to do. So I couldn't really, I don't know if Seamus wants to come in, I couldn't really comment about any of those private businesses that do that. You know, all I could really say is I suppose the support that we would provide to the sector. Seamus?
Yeah, I would be careful on it because I mean, what you find or what you report back, a lot of organizations that do engage a private company to do some of the fundraising for them don't necessarily get what they think they will out of it. I think the other thing that you have to remember as well, Peter, the bodies that you're making the funding application to will really want to know about you. They'll really want to know about your organization, what your capacity is, what you can do and what you can deliver. So that's what they'll want to be looking at. You know, they'll not be wanting to look at an intermediary, because if they're going to make you a grant, they're making an investment in you. So they want to know that you can carry that through. So my advice is best to do it yourself. I mean, get whatever help and experience you can get within the community and from organizations, but put your own organization at the center of the application. You know, there's no magic way to do this, you know.
Yep. No, we've supported Brian for years, but just you hate going back to the same people all the time when you're, as you say, we've got to learn ourselves how to.
Brian doesn't mind.
After 10 years, he gets even.
And hopefully by the end of this process, Peter, you'll be able to do the applications really well yourself anyway. So.
Yeah.
The other thing I just suppose to say is, I mean, I'd mentioned those different support organisations that are out there, and obviously you guys have been working with Brian or working with your local networks and so on here. But the idea, I guess, is as part of why you're here on this programme is you're learning and you're growing and you're becoming more confident and knowing in a sense what needs to be done, you know, to make that difference and to work in your community. So the more you can empower yourself and get those skills yourself. Okay, it still takes time, and I appreciate that, Peter. Sometimes it's getting the physical hours in the day to do the things, the problem. But the more you can do that, the better. And as I say, we do provide training. A lot of it is for free. And we also have a lot of really good webinars on there that are designed for our sector. They're not something you're going on, because if you're going onto YouTube and looking at something very generic, all this training we do is specifically for our sector in Northern Ireland and for groups like yourselves. So if there's anything that you can't find on there, anything you're looking for, any of you, and you can't find it, just contact Seamus or myself, and we'll send you the direct link, or if you can't find it and we haven't done it yet, we'll see if we can do it for you. So do try and, as Brian and Seamus has said, build up your own skills, because ultimately that's what the funders want to hear. They want to hear your voice coming through. And funders have told us that they can tell if an application has been written by a third party, because a lot of these third parties, and you know, I'm not, you know, saying not to use them, but a lot of them do sort of a cut and paste, you know, from a template and so on, you know, so it's just to make sure that you have your own mark. They're looking for a uniqueness and a very much a community voice coming through on the application. And what actually speaks volumes is if you have done your legwork and hearing from your community and what they need, and you're able to sort of list that and explain that'll actually speak louder than any kind of sort of cliched words and so on that can be used. I suppose that would be my advice.
Thank you very much.
Sandra, too. I mean, I was on the Community Foundation board for a long time, and the grants subcommittee was one of my key roles, and you're 100% right. You can identify the applications that were done by almost the same organisation, and it stands out a mile. And you got to remember too, Peter, whenever if you sign up to one of these private organisations, they're usually maybe representing maybe 20, 30 groups. So on all the funding deadlines are at the same time. So you're having a company trying to complete an application deadline for maybe 30 groups. So you're going to have a degree of uniformity right across them, and it stands out a mile, you know. So it's another thing to be wary of if you do sign up to.
No, I don't think we will, Brian. It's just they're contacting us all the time about it, but no, I think we have enough skill and people about to.
Yeah, and like you're being a bit modest too. So I know in the last number of years you have been filling out forms, you and your organisation, the cricket club, and doing them pretty well. I mean, you've got a number of grants without my support or anyone else's, so you're not that far away, believe me.
Great. All right. Happy enough then to.
Yeah. I just think on that, you know, what Sandra has been saying is there's quite a number of support organizations out there that can help. And the big thing to remember is that ask them, you know, go and look for the help. Sometimes people think it's not for me, or they're there to help somebody else. They're not necessarily there to help somebody else. They're there to help you, same as everybody else. So you choose the organizations at times that suit you, or that is the best fit for you. So when Sandra was showing you, you know, whether it's Rural Community Network, whether it's us in NICVA, whether it's CFNI or others, different times, different ones will be more appropriate to you and more useful to you. You know, a lot of these funding bodies have all been running special funds during COVID and all of that, you know, so there have been opportunities. And the thing about it is, never be afraid of asking, you know, always come forward. So if you take our organisation, we're the Northern Ireland Council for Voluntary Action. We used to be called the Northern Ireland Council for Social Services. We were set up in 1938. When we were set up then, it was about helping develop other organisations, because it was back in the hungry 30s, you know, when times were bad and unemployment was colossal. There was no welfare state and all of that. So from then to now, it's all been trying to help people like you and organizations like yours be better at whatever it is you do. It's not, and as I say, if I go back to that stuff about Robert Putnam, it doesn't even matter the type of the organizations. The more active, the better, and the more engaged, the better. So don't be afraid of ask. Sandra will provide the slides as well. And in them, we have links in them all, so you can click on and obviously go through the web and find out a bit more about all those different opportunities that might be there. So last area, going to talk about influencing policy and campaigning. So there's a nice portrait of Stormont, the big building, and obviously in terms of centre of politics, it's a very big and imposing building. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years is people used to say, my door is always open. And a lot of people might not go through because they, as I say, they think they mean somebody else. But even a place like Stormont, the public are entitled to go in there at any time. When the assembly's meeting, when there's a session taking place, or there's a committee taking place, you can go. But I know an awful lot of ordinary people would look and go, God, they don't mean me, you know. So we and people like organizations like ours and yours need to get over that, need to take the bull by the horns, and as I say, get involved. Next slide there, Sandra. And if you look at decision-making bodies, I think one of the things that you have to figure out, where does responsibility lie? And you know, I started there with the local government, but quite often we think, or people think in our areas, that local government is responsible for everything. You know, they're responsible for maybe our public lighting, and they're responsible for the roads and maybe the bins and this, that, and the other. But they're not. You know, there are a lot of responsibilities that they don't have that sit in other agencies of government. So knowing who the appropriate responsible body is, I think, becomes important if you have a problem, if you have an issue that needs to be dealt with, so as you can focus on the right place. And these are some of the places that you can focus on. Obviously, the local government, your local district council has responsibility for some things, and they do have community development responsibilities, and they do have some resources. It varies across them all. We in NICVA, Sandra actually organises a meeting with all 11 district councils and whoever's got lead responsibility for community development in them, so as that we can brief them on the Northern Ireland wide things that are going on, and that we can try and find out more from them about what they're doing locally. And so they're a place for you to tap into, and a resource, and they're important to engage with. I'll be talking a bit more about lobbying and campaigning, and there are two sides of the one coin, but one thing about lobbying is you really need to build relationships. If you just rock up to any of these bodies and you go, I need something done, I need you to do it, chances are you might not do very well. You need to build and develop relationships with them over time, so as that when you go eventually to get things done, that you're going to the right people, and that they know who you are, and they know what your status is within the local community, and they know what credibility your organization has and things like that. There's a better chance that you will get something done. When we look to the Northern Ireland Assembly, I mean, obviously the MLAs, or from all the parties, are there. And from them, you get obviously the government ministers, and the system that currently uses to hunt, it allocates those ministries across all the departments. And a lot of the stuff they have to collaborate together on. Interestingly, at the moment, obviously, when Paul Gibbon resigned, the executive cannot now meet. So you've got Robin Swan as health minister, who's now thinking, we were to have a meeting, he's thinking we're to have a meeting on Thursday to reduce all the restrictions with regard to COVID. And the executive would have made that decision. Can I do it now on my own? And he probably can. He's taken legal advice, but he probably can. And that's because the executive had already made a decision that they would not keep any of the restrictions a moment longer than was necessary. So therefore, if the Minister for Health and the Department of Health says it's not necessary, it seems to me reasonable then that that could be taken away, and he wouldn't be in breach of any law. But I'm not a lawyer, so he's taken the advice. But finding out who has responsibility for what, where it lies, and then how you influence them. And I would say always at the center of it all is building these relationships. Doesn't matter at what level or where you're trying to influence, whether it's a local agency, the local district council, or MLAs, ministers, it's all the same thing. The assembly committees, again, are made up of representatives from the different political parties, the different MLAs, and there's one for each government department, and they effectively hold the minister to account. So they scrutinize what the minister is doing, and they can be a very useful body to talk to in terms of influence and development, because they are engaged with the minister all of the time. And then the core constituency group of all of that are obviously the councillors and the MLAs. Building relationships with them is important. Now, for organisations in our sector, I think it's important that they do it in a certain way. Charities were mentioned earlier. charities are obliged under charity law to behave in a certain way, to be non-partisan in terms of their political approach. So not to favour or not to be against any particular political party, to treat them all reasonably equally in terms of the engagement. But I would also say, even if you're not a charity, that's a wise thing to do. Because if you hitch your wagon to one particular grouping, if they have influence, then you might do okay. But if they're out of influence and somebody else has got responsibility for it, then you're out in the cold. So it's probably wise to treat them and play them with a very straight bat. And that's what we do in NICVA. We treat them the same. Our relationship with them is the same in terms of our behaviors. We neither favor them or reject them. And as I say, we try to deal with them in a very straightforward fashion. And I would say that stands you in good stead. You're not, you're not dismissed by any of them as being a friend of the other lot, whoever that happens to be. So that's important. And obviously, Westminster MPs also become important. But what we have to remember as well is that they have scrutiny nowadays only over some things. So the devolution settlement as such means that certain powers are devolved to the Assembly and the Executive in Northern Ireland. And there are reserved matters, as they call it, powers that remain with Westminster. Very obvious ones with Westminster, are defence and foreign policy, but also things like the media, telecommunications, everything like that. And they might be things that are really, really important to local communities, in terms of mobile phone reception and stuff like that, in terms of delivery of parcels. And we engage with Ofcom and organizations like that to try and represent the views of people so that they get potentially the best service that they can. And some of the biggest complaints we'll hear are in areas like this. So important to look at if your community has an issue and it wants to try and get some change, finding out who's got a responsibility for it, where it lies, and how you might engage with them. The politicians always remain important, whether they're local councillors, MLAs, or MPs, because you will want to use their influence also to try and get a result in terms of your community. Next slide there, Sandra. And this thing about lobbying and campaigning, as I say, again, go on the internet and you can find umpteen definitions and explanations for it. And if you take it, there's one: lobbying is the process of seeking to influence government and its institutions by informing the public policy agenda. And that is where, as I say, you very much build a relationship. And from NICVA's point of view, the strategy that we had was that we reckoned it was a long-term thing. In our case, we wanted to put a couple of years work in before we really expected to get a return. That'll not necessarily be the case for you, in terms of local communities, but building and maintaining relationships, I think, are really important to get things done. Because you know what it's like, people are more likely to respond to you if they understand you, and as I say, have some respect for what it is you're doing. You're also about informing them, you're into advising them, you're trying to influence them, persuade them, and what you're trying to do is affect change, get the result that your organization or your community is doing. And if you look at the whole issue of campaigning, sometimes I used to say, when you're in campaigning mode, it's almost as if everything is already lost. The top bit hasn't really been effective. You might feel the community is treated very badly. The powers that be are unresponsive. No matter what you say to them, they don't do anything about it. And that can mean that sometimes you've got to get a campaign. And if a campaign is to be effective, it's the flip side of the lobbying bit, and it's about the external bit, the external influence. And what really people are trying to do, excuse me, what people are trying to do in a campaign is shift public opinion. Because if public opinion is on your side, if you've proven where public opinion sits, that's when politicians respond. And I'll use a couple of examples, a couple of really big ones in terms of how public opinion made change. Parliament 250 years ago passed, or just over 250 years ago, passed an act to prevent or to stop the slave trade, to prevent the slave trade. And slave trade at the time was a really, really lucrative business, and city ports in the UK had done exceptionally well out of it, built lots of riches on the back of it. But when Wilberforce, the Prime Minister, proposed the act, there was only actually a handful of MPs who voted against it at the time. And that was a remarkable thing. And you ask yourself why. And it was because it was probably a campaign of 30 years that went on, primarily led by Quakers and evangelical Protestants who opposed the notion of the slave trade as being an immoral thing. And through that campaign, they shifted public opinion. And when the public opinion shifted so much, Parliament followed. And that's what happened. That's what happened in terms of the change. When you look at things like the suffragette movement and votes for women, exactly the same thing happened. A campaign that shifted public opinion eventually allowed the politicians to follow, and the politicians changed the law. If you look at more recent times, 30 odd years ago, disability access was hopeless in Northern Ireland. And the public's view probably would have been, yes, I have every sympathy with people who have problems in terms of accessing public buildings and cinemas and things like that. Would I want to see a lot of money spent on it? Maybe not. But the disability organizations, ordinary groups of community-based people, shifted public opinion. And thereafter, everything shifted behind them. And you find then that disability access ultimately gets to the stage where we're at today, where it's much more the norm. Now, I know a lot of the disability groups will say, and there's a way to go yet, and I'm sure there is, but the significant travel that they've had from then to now, has been really big. So shifting public opinion can be important. We had a former head of policy at Number 10 over to talk at a NICVA conference. And I often remember one of the things he said to me when I was asking him about influence in politicians, and what he said to me was, Seamus, what do you think the most important thing is on the agenda of the Prime Minister the day after that he's won the election and is becoming the new Prime Minister? And I'm thinking, well, getting all his policies ready, and he's going, no. First thing on the agenda is to get re-elected. And what he meant was that everything is seen through that prism. Everything is seen through that lens. And what he said to me is, even if the government minister agrees with you and thinks it's a really good idea and what you're saying, is good and should be done, if they think public opinion is not there, they're not likely to do it. So shifting public opinion, bringing public opinion to bear on your issue can be very important. So even if it's in a local community of a few hundred houses, that public opinion will influence the local councillors in terms of how you might get action and get things done. But it is important to realise the distinction, I think, between the two. And you shouldn't mix the two things up. As I say, in terms of lobbying, think relationship, think influence, and in terms of the notion of campaign is when you want to almost agitate, get public opinion in a position where it brings pressure to bear on politicians for change, and effectively sometimes makes that change easy for them. Next slide there, Sandra. So that's our bit And as Sandra said, we're happy to take any questions and to engage with you, and including any things that we've not covered. We thought these are the sort of things that might spur you, give you, some ideas in terms of what you might do going forward. But if there's anything that we haven't covered that you would like to ask, feel free.
Thank you very much, Seamus. Sandra was really, really good, really interesting. I was going to bring Derek into the conversation here in a second. We just want to welcome, we've got a few more people who joined us during the conversation with Dean, Jeff, Emily and Andy, who've a couple of double ups there on the screens, but we've quite a number, I think most of our delegates here now. Derek, I mean just particularly what Seamus was saying there around influencing policy and kind of making that difference. You're someone who has been a kind of cold face in a lot of this in terms of your work with SEUPB, Piece 4, we sat on the board, and even at the local school level. What's your reflection on how that's worked for you? And how much a difference you as a community worker and a volunteer who went into that role found it?
Well, I suppose first of all, Brian, I'd probably say the Seamus and Sandra, that's probably as clear as I've ever seen it myself. What they've just gone through there, and the whole thing. I suppose maybe the only thing for me, and it's probably going to come up in a module or two time. The people that Sandra was speaking about, the NICVAs of this world and all, are all straightforward organisations to deal with. I suppose where I've had the issues where you get to a local level where there is also then conflicts of interest between groups on funding and on the way forward. And I suppose in a city like ours, that's where a lot of things have sort of come to a head, where you kind of feel at times you're in a minority against a settled group of gatekeepers. As Seamus well knows, not that long, 2013, late 2013, before I even looked at this here, I was in the building trade for a long time, and I know when I was in America with Seamus, I probably heard my frustrations about some of the long-term groups that I was having to deal with, who all really wanted to, at the start, really wanted to help, but then once you started to ask them awkward questions and try to get them to help, then that's when you did fall down, and that's probably where you need the good governance, the good support, and the actual networking that we're doing here now. It's not just about big groups all over Northern Ireland. It's actually about individuals in the community, people that we're actually sitting looking at now for the first time, maybe even hear each other speaking for the first time. So I suppose for me, that's where I see the benefit of it. Definitely all that information tonight and all the stuff that will come will be unbelievably useful. But I think, the relationship that we form and the help that we give each other probably will be of even greater significance in the long run.
And Seamus, you were talking there, very realistically in terms of how kind of community voices can make a difference. I'd be interested to hear with you how you found whenever the Assembly was suspended. For example, we as an organisation and personally kind of found at times it was easier to influence policy. It was easier to get access to people who were making the decisions, i.e. the civil servants, maybe compared to kind of trying to navigate some of the political hurdles that we come across in Northern Ireland sometimes. How did you find it? And I know you're at the forefront of a lot of the kind of policy, policy guidance or consultation, an organisation there.
Yeah, I suppose first thing, Brian, I think devolution is a good thing. I think it's in the long-term benefit of us all to have locally elected politicians in charge of making the decisions. I know it can be very frustrating at times, and I know, that we, a lot of the public, you'll hear them going, it's desperate, it's all bad, a plague on all their houses. And I talk to people across our sector who, as you know, support every shade of political opinion, and I hear the same negative stuff coming from them all, and I tell some of the politicians, it's your public that's talking about you. It's not the other crowd, So those frustrations are there, but it's in our best interest, that we have a reasonably good local working democracy. Having said that, a lot of the surveys have showed us that community and voluntary organisations, the people in them, at times have had the most faith sometimes in civil servants in terms of who they think will treat them the fairest. And there's other bodies that have not come out so well. And local government didn't come out so well many times over the years. And that was because people were worried, I think, about the conflicts of interest that Derek has mentioned, and that, that local councillor might be, favour this crowd rather than that crowd, and all that local Tammany Hall type politics that can go on. I mean, what I've seen of you, Brian, and Derek has always played it with a very straight bat, done it without fear or favour, tell people what needs to be told to them at times, but did it in a very reasonable way. And you will get people's, as you, Brian and Derek, have done, you will get people's respect, even those who disagree with you. And I think that is really, really important, because it's only through plugging away like that will you actually cut through it at some point and get the change that you're looking for. It'll not fall into anybody's lap. Everybody will not respond in glowing terms. And as I say, it takes time and it takes effort. And it takes at times being brave enough, to do the sort of things that you've all done, talk to a very, very broad range of people and try to influence them all,
Yeah, I mean, it'd be good to hear you expand, Derek, maybe in terms of what Seamus is saying there. I mean, we always complain in Derry about kind of lack of effective political leadership, and we kind of, suppose that's where the Northwest Cultural Partnership emerged from, following that vacuum and that kind of civic voice. Derek, can you talk a wee bit about your rationale behind, I remember in 2013, for example, whenever you just started off as a community worker with the Londonderry Bands Forum, you did a couple of really groundbreaking things that, were, you got a bit of stick for at the time, but broke a lot of ceilings. I'm talking specifically about the Maiden City Accord around parading, and particularly the Bands Forum work with a flag Huel, and also speaking of the Sinn Féin Ardèche. Can you talk about why you did that and what benefit you've seen doing that, just for the benefit of our participants who might not be aware of these stories?
Well, I suppose in the first case, you and Kenny forced me into it. But apart from that, no, look, I came from the building trade, and I was just I was part of a team, religion or whatever it is, didn't matter in the building site. Everybody was there to focus on getting a job done, and that, I always seen that was the way forward, getting the job done. One of the big problems that I had was that, as I say, a lot of people wanted to work, but then, kind of when you said, okay, we'll try this here, and they were saying, are you off your rocker? Like, we're not looking at anything like that. We want simple things. So I suppose on the stuff around the parading and all, it was kind of straightforward. I played a marching band. We had a lot of issues on the street. Most of them weren't caused by ourselves, but some of them were caused by ourselves. So I suppose, and I had the, maybe the strength to say, we're not always in the right. Some things that we are doing are intimidatory or whatever it is, and we need to look at that. But however, there's a lot of things going on in other places as well that we can sort of say, the reason we're doing this, I suppose one of our big things was, we took the education program and put Andy into the schools, and we went ourselves, and we started talking about why we're in bands, why we parade and stuff. And that communication level at all, it made things much easier, because people were, outside of that, were thinking, whatever they want and whatever they were told about the way, especially around bands, the way things are going. So we took that to the people who were opposing us, and we then asked them the question why they were opposing us after they heard what we said, and it wasn't as easy to argue that to us. So that made it a bit easier for us. I suppose the Ardèche stuff and the working with Cultureland, I'm of the opinion that, most of what we do musically, culturally, music, dance, it's in every culture. It's just different sides of the same story, really. And I think, as we sort of started to say recently, it's not the culture that we're arguing about. It's our own identity within culture that we're arguing about. So therefore, the more we know about each other, the better for that. So I suppose the culture land thing worked around that. The other big thing was, as you're well aware, those people were very, very experienced in community work, and we weren't. So I suppose we learned a lot from those people simply by being in the same room, watching the way they operated, listening to who they were speaking to, meeting the people they were speaking to, the very thing that Seamus was speaking about, forming relationships with people that we didn't know. So that really helped us. And then I suppose the stuff around our days, the same thing again about, we were looking to speak about culture, we were looking to speak about education. It happened to be at that time, Sinn Féin were the culture minister and the education minister. Therefore, those were the people we needed to lobby or, speak to. So it made sense for us to go and simply put our case on that platform. And then out of that there, we've got an education program. Culturally, things worked a lot better for us, and we had a lot more influence than what we did after that.
Yeah, it's a lot about, Seamus talked about Putnam social capital, and I suppose in Derry, we've broken those barriers, like we've developed those relationships, and I suppose, and for all the participants, making that first step is usually the most difficult one, but for all the faults over the years and the hurdles we've had to overcome, I've never once had from any member of the community from whatever shade ever turn us down for support if you knock on that door. And as Seamus said, there's a lot of coordinating bodies out there that can provide that support, but there's a lot on our doorstep as well, people who've been through these processes before, and it's about, I suppose, making being brave enough initially to ask for that support.
Well, I just think, Brian, in terms of what Derek was saying, if you take a Londonderry Bands Forum, he went places where it wasn't normally expected that people like him representing that forum would go. And if you think about it, it put the position of the bands and the culture out there in a place where it needed to be heard. There's no point in talking to yourself all of the time, if you want to get change done. And I think, as I reflected to you before, back in the 1990s, NICVA supported a piece of work, and it was called Community Development in Protestant Areas. It wasn't about Protestant community work, but it was about areas where it seemed to be a dearth of community development. And Sammy Douglas worked for NICVA at that time. People probably remember more recent times, Sammy went on to be an MLA, DUP MLA in Stormont for East Belfast, But people like Billy Hutchison were involved, Glennie Barr was involved for a while in Waterside, and looking at this whole issue. And what it recognised was that in a lot of the Catholic areas, there was much more experience in development. And it was noticed that, and people were saying that's because they had to do some things. They had to do some things for themselves. And the recognition was to try and get some of the working class Protestant areas into a position where it would catch up by promoting this community development notion. And I remember at the launch of it, Gusty Spence said, it's not about coveting what they're doing, but it's about learning from it and taking the techniques, and doing that. And we're still in that position in many areas, So it's about taking things into our own hands and then having the wit to be able to do something about it. And not just talking to ourselves, I think, is the important thing. Doing the things that Derek has done, you need to put it out there, talk to other people, because then you start to get resolution to some of these issues.
Yeah, and I know Derek, he didn't mention it in his what he was saying there, but I mean, you will get some grief, be it from, probably less so from members of your peers or members from your own community, but maybe more so from some political leaders who might see you as a threat to their power base. So I suppose the key message there is to, is to have the bravery to give it a go. Folks, we're at 5 minutes away here. I'm conscious here that a few people may want to ask a few questions to Derek or to Sandra or Seamus. If there's any points of clarification that you want to raise, or any comments you want to raise. I know there's a kind of range of experience within our participants at the moment. But is there anything there that you want clarification on? I know Seamus said he's and Sandra are going to send through all the links and the information, the slides. So I would recommend you use them.
No, just what Derek done was a game changer, Brian, on the unions side. They go and look at best practice, as I say, down in Cortland and places like that. Like even that program I'm at the minute over in the Craigan, the stuff they're doing in Gaila, we're miles behind here. So looking at best practice and bringing it across to our communities and their education sort of side of things is definitely the way forward.
Can I ask you, Peter? I mean, you're someone who has done a lot of work. I mean, you're the epitome of practice before theory. And a lot of stuff you've done with the cricket club and that. You know, how do you see? What are the challenges for you in your community in New Buildings? You know, if you were to put your head above the parapet the way that people in
groups, the unions probably the same thing. We have 6 or 7 churches, just the same thing. Too many splits. People looking for power, Brian, over than coming as a collective and working together as a one, like a partnership sort of idea. So like we're stronger together. What Seamus was saying earlier on. So we need each other.
Yeah, and I mean your work as well. You want to talk about your work, Peter, in terms of the inclusiveness that you brought through the cricket club, you know, with the Indian community and that.
Oh, definitely, it's been a game changer for us. Even funding, like we went from maybe getting the odd grant 3,000, 6,000, they reaching out to the Indian community, and hey, we're up now. We have a friendship cup now that they come from Portadown, Belfast, Letterkenny, Portadown, all around now. Every year there's 100 of them coming. They set up, have their own festival, and the community comes and watch it. Like if you said that 5 years ago in New Hiltons, you would say you're barking mad, but there it is. It's up and running. It's going successful. So it's just reaching the hand of friendship again.
Yeah, and you've never received any opposition within your community, despite, you know, the cross community nature what New Buildings Cricket Club do.
None at all. The only thing that they wouldn't buy a Coke at the bar is the only problem, but everything else, their manners, the way they bring their family, bring their food, fantastic.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of the broader New Buildings community, Peter. You've always had a lot of support.
Oh, big time, and that's as we share the same, as you said, the same dances, only different sounds and different things. We share the same love of cricket and same as them. So there's a mutual respect there. So no, it's very good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, folks, does anyone else want to comment or before we finish? I mean, I'm going to, before I hand it over to yourself, James, just to round it up, just to remind you folks that next week we're actually going to be expanding on some of the stuff that Seamus and Sandra talked about. We're going to go into more detail on government and political structures, and we're also going to have a couple of local councillors here as well as part of the panel, not to talk about their political views, but to talk about how they find being part of that decision-making process within council, some of the obstacles they've come across and how they overcome them. So hopefully you'll find that practical and useful. And we, again, Sean will be sending out evaluation sheets, as James indicated at the start. This is really important for us because, without sounding like a broken record, we're piloting this project and we want to make it as useful and as beneficial to you as you can. So do please return those and be as honest as you need to be on them. And as I say, we'll send the link out before next Tuesday's event. Okay, James, over to yourself.
Sorry, Brian, it's Aaron here. Do you mind if I ask a quick question to the guys?
Of course, yeah.
Sandra and Seamus, I come from a teaching background. I've just kind of recently moved back to Northern Ireland. I'm project coordinator at the minute at the Nerve Centre. I've got a few ideas though that I want to kind of pitch to them, to the Nerve Centre. So I just kind of wanted.
I'm still not sure.
Sorry, that's my watch. I wanted to kind of do a bit of research before I kind of do my pitch. In terms of funding for education projects, would it be through the same kind of places that you were mentioning earlier, or would it be more through the council that you'd be looking for funding for that?
No, absolutely, Aaron. Any of those funding bodies that I have listed and I'll send through to Brian this evening, any of them. I mean, depending on what your educational program is and what the
Yeah.
purpose of it is, I suppose it's, what you often have to think about is, it might be the mechanism might be education, but it maybe is in order to improve whatever it is within the community. So it's looking at that. You can search if you can't find one there and you don't have Grant Tracker, we can do a search for you under, say, education and health combined, or education and youth combined, or whatever it is. So we'd be happy to do a wee bit of, work with you on that if you wanted to present a paper to the Nerve Centre and have some sort of information on it. But certainly those details I'm going to send to Brian will be very useful to start as a starting point. But if you want us to do a wee bit more work on it, just get in touch with me. My details are on the slides there, the email. So let me know if you need any more help with it.
That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
Aaron.
Thanks so much.
We have one staff member in NICVA, Jocelyn Horton, and her job is she looks after the Grant Tracker and gathers all the information and she pumps that out, but she'll also provide advice and help to organizations, like yours. And so you can contact Jocelyn, you can have a session with her, and you can say, here's the things that, here's what we're focused on, this is what we want to try and do, where might we get support for that? And she'll help you then target, because when you mention education, that's big and broad. Once you get down into what it is you want to do, there might be a whole variety. And what it does is it knocks out all the ones that there's no point wasting your time with, that they'll be too hard, there's not much chance of success, but maybe flag up the ones where there is a better chance. And then, as Sandra says, in terms of your pitch, you've got to make a reasoned argument. So what's the pros and cons of what it is you're trying to do? What's the benefits and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve and get? And where might the money come from? I mean, that's what, if I was on the board of the Nerve Centre, I'd be wanting to hear,
That's fantastic. Thanks so much.
But Jocelyn can be there to help any of you. She'll do an hour with any of you at any time, if you want to pick up on this,
And I suppose maybe that's the thing that I meant to say, and it did go to my head, and I'm glad Aaron brought it back in. We've heard a lot of things about where to get funding. The biggest thing of that is what you want the funding for and what your program is. That is the thing that we're hoping to get across probably in a lesson or two's time when we look at that. It's getting a good idea, and then it's fleshing it out to the end before you look for the funding. Know exactly what you want to do.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned when we did the American study visit, Derek, and one of the things I was always conscious of was not copying what other people have done. When you find somebody's done a really successful project or something, saying, God, we should do that, copy it. No, it's look at what they do, think about the problems that they were trying to address, and then think, what's yours, what's different, and then build it. Quite often when you try and copy what somebody else has done, it doesn't work. So what you want to use is their inspiration and then translate that into what you want. I've seen some areas going, we want whatever they have, but what they have mightn't suit what's needed in your area. So therefore you gotta make it work for you. So use the other people's inspiration.
Yeah, thanks for that, Seamus. I suppose in conclusion, Luxie, can I just thank you all again? And I have to say, this is our third module, and thanks to Aaron for asking that last question there, because I know Aaron has been sharing information through through Derek and so on, passing on to other group members that he feels may be beneficial for some of the members on here. Just 2 or 3 wee bullet points that I wrote down tonight, and I think Seamus started off by saying ordinary people working together, community development, and that's what we are, that's who we are. I think he also said that, and I could honestly say that everybody on here is probably doing community development work, and in the early days without even knowing it, and myself included. Nobody is unapproachable, whether it's the First Minister of the country or whoever it is, but I think the advice there was good to build that relationship before you actually go and meet up with the people that have influence in creating policy and everything else. And the other thing, I think it might have been Seamus again, don't hitch your wagon to one particular group. And Derek alluded to this here a wee bit, because if you want a wee bit of homework tonight, The minister responsible for the Wall City Tattoo in 2013 in Londonderry was the Minister of Culture, Arts and Leisure. So you can Google tonight who was the Minister of Culture, Arts and Leisure in 2013. The Minister 6 years ago of Education is the Minister responsible for the education project going around schools now to 1,000 kids a week, and that's Highland Dance tuition, bagpipe tuition and B-flat tuition. So the Minister of Education 6 years ago, go and find out who it is, and the decal Minister in 2013. So don't hitch your wagons to the one particular group.
James.
Seamus and Sandra, you don't see it. A lot of us here are not very good technically, and we're scared to put anything in chat box. Although I think I've seen the first comment coming up there. There's a lot more thanks that was actually text to me to my phone, Seamus, because they wouldn't type into chat box saying how enjoyable tonight's session was. So, as I say, thank you very much for joining on, and thanks to you, Brian, for chairing it, and to Derek's contribution as well.
Okay, thank you, folks. So hopefully see you all next week. Great turnout tonight again.
What night's
Thanks for-
Stuart?
Thanks for inviting us anytime, Brian.
Thanks a lot, and Sandra. We will be in touch. We really appreciate you coming along and doing this.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
What night is doing next week, Brian?
We're going to try and probably stick to Tuesday, Mark. Is that not? That's not great for you, is it?
No, Tuesday night suits me fine. No.
That's David, I think.
Oh, David. Sorry, David. Yeah. Sorry, David. Yeah.
Tuesday night suits.
If Tuesday sits you, that's fine. As long as everyone else seems to work okay.
Thank you, folks.
We'll see you again.
Very much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra.
See you all.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.
Bye.